Welcome back, agriculture and STEM students at Tomlin Middle in Plant City, Florida. My name is Tavis Douglas. I'm the Associate Professor of Agribusiness at the College of Central Florida in Ocala, Florida. And today we're out here at Wet Hammock Farm again in Central Florida, which is in Marion County. And today we're going to discuss blackberries. But we're about 6 weeks or so away from harvest here on blackberries. You can see we're in one field here. So we'll discuss a few of the things, historical things about blackberries, and then some of the production things we deal with now. So blackberries are from the family, or I'm sorry, from the genus of rubus. They're associated, or they're related to things like raspberries and dewberries. The problem is with species on blackberries, there are many hybridizations of blackberries from around the world, so it's kind of hard to nail down exactly taxonomic names for each individual blackberry. So like I said, they are related to they're not raspberries, but they are related to raspberries, as well as a few other cultivated crops that we grow throughout the world. They're also collectively known as brambles, meaning that historically they've grown in big thickets and thatches in natural areas. As you're well aware, blackberries grow native and they grow wild all over the place here in Florida as well. Today we're discussing some of the cultivated varieties that we deal with. So blackberries are actually native to pretty much all over the world, from Northwest Africa, all across Europe, Central and Western Asia, as well as North and South America. But the earliest known consumption of the fruit on blackberries, we think, is somewhere between 2,500 years ago in the area where Denmark is now in Northern Europe. Blackberry leaves, blackberry shoots, blackberry roots have been consumed and brewed in teas for hundreds of years for medicinal purposes, to cure many ailments from mouth issues to gastrointestinal problems throughout the world for a long time. However, most blackberry cultivation didn't begin until the early 20th century. As you know, blackberries, most of them have quite a bit of thorns on them. In the early 20th century, a blackberry without thorns, or a thornless blackberry, was discovered in the wild, and a lot of breeding efforts took place to develop a good tasting thornless blackberry variety. So most of those efforts actually came later in the 20th century, really in the 1990s, where varieties, especially here in the United States, were developed at the University of Arkansas and at NC State, where they were developing varieties to grow here in the South that had good qualities as far as flavor and shipping qualities, as well as the thornless qualities as well. So a few things about blackberries that are unique to them as opposed to other plants is, I have a few drawings here again, and blackberries are a perennial crop, meaning that blackberries will they're going to grow every year. You know, for many years in a row. You don't have to replant them. However, that's not entirely true. So the blackberries themselves are perennials. So I drew a little sketch here. The roots on blackberries are perennials, meaning that the roots are going to live underground for a long time. However, the tops are biannuals. So there's not a whole lot of plants that are, most plants are going to be annuals, meaning that they live one season and then they produce a flower, seed, fruit, whatever, and then they die. Or they're going to be perennials, like citrus crops that we grow here in Florida, and they're going to continually produce year after year. Blackberries, the roots actually produce year after year, but the tops don't. So the tops are biannual, meaning that they take 2 seasons of growth, or they grow 2 seasons, and then the tops die back. So I think so on blackberries, they're called stems, also known as canes, which are up here. This part of the plant's biannual, this part is perennial, and we'll discuss some of the cultural things that are associated with that in a second. So to get a little bit more technical, so on the biannual canes part, we have 1 year growth. The first year growth on blackberries is very vigorous, green growing, lots of leaves. And this is known as the primicane stage. So primo meaning 1. So the primicane, that first year, they're just growing, lots of shoots. When you get to year 2, they, with a little bit of chill, these are also a temperate crop. So much like discussing peaches, they need some chill. Once the canes get some chill on them, they convert to what's known as the floricane. So then in this second stage of growth, or the second year of growth, they don't grow. Meaning that they're not going to continually, you know, grow longer canes. What they'll do, that wood transitions, it turns to a slightly different color, and in that second year of growth, lateral branches begin to break. There's a few leaves on them, but then you get a lot of flowers, hence the name floricane. And on that wood, and from those flowers, the fruit is produced, and then we harvest that, and then the tops of the canes die back, and then we have to cut those out. So behind me and some of the other things that we're going to look at, all of this wood right, you know, it's late April right now, or mid to late April, and all of the wood that we have right now is all in the second stage growth, so it's all in this floricane stage, and so there's a lot of blooms out here on that type of wood. What else do we have? So growth habits. So blackberries have, because there are many different varieties of them and many different cultivars of blackberries, there's a wide difference in growth habits on blackberries. So they're technically, they can be a bush sometimes, they can kind of also be a vine sometimes, like you see behind me, but we classify them in three ways. So we have upright growth on some blackberry varieties. We have a semi-upright growth, so they're kind of in between, and then we have the trailing variety of blackberries here. So culturally, we have to treat these differently. So here, what hammock, they grow trailing varieties, and then these semi-erect varieties. So there's culturally, we have to treat these a little bit different, which we'll look at. So on the trailing varieties, we actually use a trellis system on these. If you could see this, this is kind of the trellis system that you can see, but this is what all the structure is behind me. So this is the trellis system. We run what's known as a V-trellis, meaning that we have 4 cables looking down the row. We have 4 cables, or 2 on each side, and the plant's growing in the middle, and half the plant gets pulled up to one side and half the plant gets pulled up on the other. If you were to look at it from the side view, he would be the base of the plant, and we would tie the canes, and we would separate them as much as we can, and we would tie them up the trellis. So this would be on a trailing variety. Again, behind me is a trailing variety, which we'll look at a little bit closer. We do this, we tie these up in a V-trellis for almost the same reason that we do peaches. We do it for surface area. The more surface area that we have exposed to sunlight, the more blooms you're going to get, the more fruit you're going to get. So again, in this open center, blooms will develop, and then on this outside as well, we'll have quite a bit of blooms. There's many different styles of trellises. That's just the trellis system that we use here. It's kind of the most economical, and for the purposes of growing the fruit here, it's one of the best ways to trellis the fruits. All right, so the fruit on itself. So again, we're several weeks out from harvest. We'll look at some of the fruit is just beginning to develop, and there's still quite a bit of bloom out here, so we're a ways from harvest. But if we were to look at the fruit itself, technically a blackberry, in botanical terms, is not necessarily a berry. It's actually known as an aggregate fruit, meaning that the fruit itself has many little, what's known as drupelets. So the fruit itself has a lot of small drupelets, or smaller pieces of fruit. So each little druplet in itself is its own piece of fruit. But when we harvest it, we harvest the whole thing right off of it. So it's known as an aggregate fruit because of that. What else do we have here? It's also known as an accessory fruit. So it's known as an accessory fruit because it's not just on the outside you see the drupelets, which are the small pieces of fruit, but on the inside of the berry itself, you still have some flower parts that actually that we consume as well as part of the fruit. So it's known as an accessory fruit because it's not just the accessory part of the fruit isn't just the fruit itself, but some of the flower parts that are also consumed within the fruit. So a few things, like I said, we're a few weeks away from harvest, but we're going to check out some of the cultural systems that we use here and talk a little bit about that. So like I mentioned before, we're growing both the trailing as well as the semi-upright blackberries here. The first one that we're going to focus on is a variety that is a trailing variety. So this variety here does not naturally grow up on this trellis. We actually have to hand tie the plants to the cable itself. So we tie this up, otherwise they would grow flat on the ground, and all your fruit is going to be on the ground, and you definitely wouldn't want that. So we tie up these varieties. Also, like I said before, these plants are in the floricane stage, so they're blooming right now. I think you can see, if I can get a good shot of one, you can see some of the fruit starting to develop, some of the blackberries, and as well as some of the leaves that are associated with it. So there is a little bit of primocane growth actually happening here. So you see this vigorous growing. There's no blooms on it. It's just a vibrant, healthy green leaves and stem. And the stem's green. If you notice on the floricane wood, it's actually a purple color. So that's our floricane with the flowers on it, second-year-old wood. And this is our first-year-old wood that's starting to grow. So this wood will produce fruit. It's very young now, but once we, after harvest, all of this primocane, all of this floricane wood actually dies. And what we have to do is we have to come back into the base, and we have to cut out all of that floricane wood and encourage this primocane wood to continue to grow. And then at the end of next year, they're going to be, you know, the same thing again, the same size. As you can see in this part of the field, this is a semi-upright variety. So we actually do not trellis these particular varieties that have this growth habit. We just prune them more into a bush shape. As you can see, these are also blooming, but the blooms on this particular variety are actually pink instead of white. So we grow about 4 different varieties here, and all of this is floricane growth. We don't have much primocane growth yet. The one thing I didn't mention before is we actually grow these on plastic. So this is a permanent plastic, and this is mainly done for weed control. And if we didn't have plastic down here, the weeds would compete with blueberries, and it would be very, very difficult to manage. And then underneath this plastic, how we irrigate these might be hard to see. And I can't get to it, but there's actually drip tape underneath here. So there's 2 lines of drip tape that run on either side of the plant, and that's solely how we irrigate these crops. And we also do some fertigation as well, running liquid fertilizer through the line. I actually did find a primocane right here. You can see this bright green piece of wood here. This is next year's fruiting wood, and this is this year's fruiting wood. So after the season, the tops of these plants are going to die, and we're going to go in and we're going to cut out all of this stuff. Sometime in July, we'll cut all this out, pull it all out of the field, get rid of it, and encourage all this new growth to take the place of the old floricane wood. We've trialed a few different systems here. This is another semi-upright variety. So there is a trellis system in place, but we're actually not using the trellis. We found that as far as spacing, the best spacing for us is we like to keep these on these are 8 feet apart. So each row from center to center is going to be 8 feet. And then down the row, we determined that it's best to space the plants out a little bit further. So we spaced those out about 6 feet apart. We used to run them much closer, but it was much harder to manage. So we like to maintain this particular area because of the bush type plants. We like to maintain a grass-free area across this entire block. And then on the other side, where we were on the trellis side, we actually do maintain a sod strip, a grass strip in the middle. And again, we're spacing these out about 6 feet apart as well. So the only difference between these semi-upright varieties and the trailing varieties is the actual use of the trellis system. Of course, this trellis varieties are much harder to maintain. And you might ask, why do we grow the trellised ones versus the untrellised ones? Well, they have different characteristics for different purposes for us. So like I said, there's 4 varieties that are grown here, and they're grown all for this kind of the same market, but they have different uses within that market. Thank you for joining me on another virtual field trip on Blackberry production, and go Tigers!